you ever had a goal that just seemed impossible? If so, you've come to the right place. Welcome to the Notable Peeps podcast, a series that gives attention to remarkable people who are putting on their shoes, doing their best, and believing in the impossible.
All my dreams are coming true.
Hey, welcome to the Notable Peeps podcast. My name's Steph, and I'm chatting with Julie. And Julie, to start off, every episode, I like to start with the question because our tagline is put on your shoes, do your best, and believe in the impossible. So can you take us back to a time in your life that was a challenge and how you were able to overcome it?
Yeah, absolutely. So I am going to share with you how a drinking problem turned into a 200-mile hike alone through the Colorado wilderness, which turned into eventually helping other people like build a great life without alcohol. So yeah, we'll kind of start at the beginning. I think it's important to talk about kind of what that drinking problem looked like, because we all have this picture in our head of what that looks like, what it looks like when someone drinks too much, when someone's like a quote unquote alcoholic. And I never fit that picture, not even a little bit. I didn't even start drinking until I was in my mid-20s. So I had 2 kids. I was doing the mom thing. We have a little farm. Like everything was pretty idyllic and also really stressful and really exhausting. And mommy wine culture is a thing. Like it is just expected that that's what you do at the end of the day. So you drink a glass of wine and that's how you self-care and unwind. And, and it turned us very slowly, very insidiously turned into, I was drinking a bottle of wine at night, every night, or most nights at least. And, there comes this moment where you're like, wow, I think I need to back off a little bit. And you do, and you realize it's way harder than you thought it was going to be. And then things get a little bit scary and you're like, oh, wait, like I might actually be in trouble here. And so this whole time, everything on the outside looked great. I had my kids were homeschooled and we were doing field trips all over and just, it looked so lovely. We had horses and goats and we were milking goats and making cheese and all of the stuff. And so nobody ever would have guessed. Even my husband had no idea because he worked out of town enough that, I could get by with never letting him find out. So the part that I think most people don't realize is that what you see on the outside very rarely with someone who's drinking that much matches what's going on the inside. So what I was dealing with inside was essentially like self-loathing. I would wake up in the morning and stare at myself in the mirror and just hate everything that I saw because I was so ashamed of the point that I had gotten to. And I always felt like I wasn't good enough. Like my kids deserved a better mom. Like my husband deserved a better wife. I wasn't cool enough and I didn't fit in and I needed to try harder to get people to like me more. And it was like this exhausting, crushing perfectionism that I was just drowning in. So on the outside, it was all smiles and pretty and good. And on the inside, I was drowning in really hard feelings and really hard thoughts that nobody ever would have guessed. That's kind of like puts everything into a little bit of a perspective for you so you can kind of imagine what that looked like. And, I tried to stop drinking. And I succeeded for a while. And then I went back. And that happened multiple times. I might quit for a couple of months. There was one time I quit for over a year, but eventually got pulled back because all of those feelings inside and all of that stuff that I was dealing with, like that becomes really difficult. And the easy way to handle it is to numb it. And alcohol is really good at that, So, yeah. And every time I would stop and then I would eventually go back, it felt like it got a little bit worse. And it got a little bit harder to quit the next time. And so it got scary. And I never talked to anybody about it. God forbid anybody find out because my perfect persona, made it so that I felt like I couldn't tell anybody what was going on. And when you're in that place and your life doesn't fit the picture of what an alcohol problem looks like, you're like, I'm the only one who's going through this. It feels so isolating that I didn't talk to anybody. I just sat there and tried to battle it out by myself. So eventually, and I'll skip past most of the drama because it's probably not necessary, but I got really close to burning my life down. And you would never guess it until, horrible things happen and it started falling apart. And so the picture on the outside started crumbling a little bit, not a whole lot, but enough that I was terrified. And so I got it in my head that it would be a really good idea to go for a 200-mile walk through the woods in Colorado. I live in Colorado, so, it's familiar territory. And people are like, why on earth would you think that like a 200-mile hike is a great idea? And I don't even know that I can honestly give you a solid answer. It's not like this big dream that I'd had forever. It felt like a chance to just almost escape for a little while and do something that was so big and so jarring that I didn't have to think about my life for a while because it was so out of control. And I was so scared of trying to make it through a day without drinking that plopping myself in the woods where there is no access to alcohol, it felt like something I needed to do. And I knew from experience that like pushing my body and just pushing myself physically was really good for me, and that it felt like a little bit of a like healing, or it felt like a little bit of a break. So it was that just kind of to an extreme. So yeah, I decided that I was going to hike 200 miles. I was always a hiker. I had hiked, 20-mile backpacking trips, little things here and there, but I had never done anything that massive before. And I was desperate. I was reaching for something that was going to give me some space from all of the pain and just, I guess, see what came of it. And I don't know that I had any real expectations from it, but it definitely ended up being like the shock that my system needed at that point to shake things up and change some perspectives and get back in touch with myself.
Well, I would imagine too, 200 miles, not just like walking, you're hiking in the mountains. And so I'm sure that's a huge confidence boost to be like, okay, I can do hard things. Look, I just did that.
Yeah, it's not a confidence boost when you're in it because you're like,
yeah.
oh my God, what am I doing? Afterwards, for sure. It's one of those, like, if I can do that, I can do anything. And, I tell people like I'm going on a long walk, and I still actually every summer now, I still do this. I go on a long walk by myself, but I tell people, yeah, I'm going to go on a long walk. Like it's a lot more than a walk. We're talking like steep mountains, 12,000 feet of elevation with 40 pounds on your back. Like it is a trek. And of course I had no idea really what I was getting into. I had no idea what I was going to be facing for a little over 2 weeks out there by myself. But yeah, confidence came after, for sure. A lot of things came. So yeah, I will share with you if you want, like just some stories of what that hike was like. I love sharing this because it's so hard to imagine what it's like to hike 200 miles. And like, let's be clear, like I'm not some super fit, super athletic lady. I'm like, I mean, when I started this, I was like, middle-aged, kind of chunky mom who was like, I liked going for short hikes, but I was not some ultra athlete by any means. I was just a girl who really needed a break from life. So yeah. And what I didn't realize going into it was that like a lot of these experiences on the trail were going to set me up in a way that made sobriety actually feel possible. It taught me so many lessons that I could carry into my life when I got home that helped sobriety feel possible and manageable and like something I could actually do. Because up until then, it felt like I was never going to get it. I was just always going to fall back and hate who I was. And so the experiences that happened on the trail, and there were so many of them, that's, I think, what really brought me into a space where I'm like, okay, I actually think that I can do this and I can make some changes. I guess like the number one lesson that I learned out there hiking is that discomfort will not kill you. And that seems like everybody knows that, right? But when you're drinking to avoid feeling discomfort because you feel like you cannot handle the emotional pain that you're experiencing. And when you decide you're going to stop and then you start craving alcohol, like if you've never experienced that, your brain catches the idea that you need a drink and it is so uncomfortable that all you can think of is, I have to stop the discomfort. I can't stand it anymore. And when you are hiking 200 miles up and down some of the biggest mountains you've ever seen, you realize I can handle discomfort. I might not like it. I don't have to like it, but I'm going to get through it. And there's nothing I can do that is going to turn off the discomfort. I just know eventually it's going to stop. And that lesson was massive for me. And for somebody who ran from emotional discomfort at any opportunity, I think that was the biggest, most important lesson that I took from these long hikes and the first one especially. So I had planned originally to do this first hike with a friend, and we had backpacked together. She was my best hiking buddy. We did all of our adventures together, and she's the person I learned how to backpack with. And we started out, we hiked a couple miles the first night and just set up camp, and then we were ready to go, and we're like, all right, 14-mile days, we got this, right? And we made it maybe 6 or 7 miles, and she started not feeling very well. And by about 8 or 9 miles, we hit a point where we reached a road that also had cell phone service, which almost never happens when you're hiking in the wilderness like we were. And she was like, I can't keep doing this. I cannot keep going. I don't feel good. And so she called her daughter, and her daughter drove to come pick her up. And by that time, it was 8 o'clock at night. And it was dark. We were on the side of a mountain where a road passed through. And I had to decide at that moment, like, am I going to continue this entire thing alone? I'd never hiked alone before. And I'm like, do I give up on this 200-mile plan that I had, that I've been preparing for and planning for? And it's something I really felt like I needed. Or am I going to give it up, or am I going to try to do this alone and figure out what hiking alone solo for weeks looks like? And like right there on the side of a mountain, I was at that point 2 days sober. It had been 2 days. And so your anxiety is cranking if you've never drank too much. And even people who don't have a drinking problem, you know what it's like when you drink too much and the next day you have anxiety. I was full of anxiety. And I sat there, I was like, I'm not going to quit. I'm going to do this. I'm going to go by myself. I'm going to figure out what that looks like. And so I set up my tent right there on the side of the hill that night. And then I spent my first night alone in the woods. And I was like, all right, I guess this is what it looks like. I'm going to figure it out. And, people are like, weren't you scared of like bears and mountain lions and moose? And like, we have some animals here that they can be a little scary, a little intimidating in Colorado. And to be perfectly honest, I was more afraid of being alone with my own thoughts for that long than I was of any of the other animals, because my thoughts were not kind. My thoughts at that point in my life, my thoughts were downright cruel, and I was going to have no way to stop them. I wasn't going to have anybody to talk to take my mind off of the things going through my head. And the thought of that for 2 weeks with no break was terrifying. So when I was laying there on the side of that hill alone for the first night, that's all I could think about was like, how am I going to make peace with everything going through my head right now? So yeah.
That was one of my questions. I was curious if you had like done stuff by yourself, but like to the fact that you were like, okay, you're constantly distracting yourself with things, and then you're hiking. It's not like you can just turn on a show, right? Like you're by yourself in the mountains. I can see how like that made you be like, okay, if I could do this, I can do anything. And I love how you said like, just that you had that decision process where you're like, okay, like I can turn back now or I can stay. And what a pivotal point in your life right there, that decision to stay on that trail.
It really was like that decision at that moment. And I knew inside that was something I needed to do. It was just a matter of, do I finally honor everything that's going on internally and show up for myself, or do I run because I'm afraid? And at that moment, I honored what I knew that I needed. And I'm so glad that I did, because really that was I want to say that was like the kickstart to essentially an entire life transition, right? Because when you do decide to quit drinking, when that's been your identity and your coping skill for so long, we're talking, it's not just like quitting a bad habit. It's not like, you stop biting your nails. This is like a full blown life transition that happens when you decide that you're going to stop drinking. So that was the kickoff point for what ended up being a full life transition. But and then some of the other little lessons that came with that. So I was sitting there laying in my tent. It was like the third day. I was exhausted. My feet hurt. My knees hurt. Everything hurt. I was laying there crying a little bit, wondering what on earth I was doing and what I'd gotten myself into, and just dreading the next day, because I knew that there was this huge climb the next day. And, huge climbs are hard, especially when you're carrying a lot of weight on your back. And I was dreading it. Like I just wanted to go to sleep, and I wanted a place to escape, and there was nowhere to escape. And I got up in the morning, and the first thing that I needed to do was filter some water. You carry a water filter with you, and there's creeks every so often, and you stop and filter some water for the morning. And I stopped and at this creek, and there was this other guy there, another hiker. I mean, he was probably about 10 years older than me, super outgoing, super friendly guy. Never met him before. His name was Boomer. And he's like,
I feel like the name Boomer, I have the picture right there.
He was so great. He reminded me of like a high school PE teacher. He was like all muscle, and I don't know. He was so nice though, and he's like, "How you doing?" And I was like, "Honestly, I'm not great. Like I'm dreading today. I have no idea what I've gotten myself into." And he's like, "Yeah, me too." And like the words "me too" at that moment, I was like, oh my God, like this guy looks like he's got it all figured out. And he's like feeling the same thing I'm feeling. Like, how on earth are we going to get up this mountain? Because it's going to be so freaking hard. And just hearing that, like, he couldn't make it any easier. He didn't have any great tips for me because it was his first time doing something like that too. But he was like, yeah, I'm going to suffer right along with you, and he was faster than me. He made it up the hill long before I did. But just hearing those words, like, yeah, this is really hard for me too, shifted so much inside of me. And that's one of those lessons that, again, you carry with you into life, where if you show up honestly and somebody's like, how you doing? And you're like, honest, like, I'm not great right now. I'm going through this really hard thing. And somebody else is able to be like, yeah, me too. Like, that's really hard for me too. It automatically, you don't feel alone anymore. It lifts some weight. And if you take that back to the sobriety thing, when you show up and you talk to people for the first time about the fact that you drink too much and you're getting scared, they say, oh, I've been there. Like, I know what that feels like. Or, yeah, I'm there right now. I'm trying to quit too. It lifts so much fear and so much shame and so much of the heaviness. And that again, was one of those lessons that I took from the trail, brought back to my life, and it's something I still do. We always want to pretend like we're tough, like we have it all figured out, like we're good and we're strong and we're capable. And I think women especially, we like to do that, right? Like, we have something to prove. And as soon as you stop trying to prove something and you're like, you know what, I'm in a really hard place right now, and I really don't know how I'm going to make it through. And somebody else is like, you know what, I've been there. I can't fix it for you, but I can sit here with you. And it changes everything in that moment, no matter what it is that you're struggling with.
For sure. Like, because like it makes you be like, well, if this person can do it, maybe I can too. Or if they're struggling, like, so I love that that was an example for you. And before you shared that story, you said something that I've been thinking about, that I loved how you said it. You said, I, in that decision, decided if I was going to, like, to stay that night, to honor myself.
Mhm.
And I was like, I've never really thought of, because honor, like, you hear honor is like such respect, and it's usually talking about other people, right? Like, to honor.
Yeah.
But to honor yourself, I was like, oh, that puts it into perspective more. Are you going to respect yourself? Are you going to, I mean, I don't know the definition of honor, but I always just think of respect. So I thought that that was really cool. And that's something that I'm going to take away from this, is like, am I honoring myself with, like, the decisions? Because we all know what's best for us, right?
Mhm.
But sometimes we don't want to do it.
It's hard. It's hard. And too, so many of us are in this place where we are always trying to take care of everyone around us. Everybody else always comes first. And to put yourself, like, to honor yourself is really hard. And it takes a lot of courage, especially when it's not something you're used to doing. That was a huge lesson that I had to learn, because since then I've had to make the choice to honor myself over and over and over again. And it's not easy. It sounds pretty and it sounds so inspiring, and you know, but it's hard. It's messy and it's hard to choose to honor yourself. So, yeah.
That you said courage too, because, like, whatever it is to make that change is that courage to, like, look at what's going on and really be honest. You had to take that courage to, like, sit with yourself for those 2 weeks and go on, like, this hard trek, but then physically, right? But anyways, I just love how you worded all that. Like, it's getting me thinking of, okay, like, what do I need to do to have courage to honor myself?
Yeah, I would love to hear what you come up with. I think that essentially speaks to exactly what I do now. All of what you're saying there, that was stuff that I learned at that moment. And I was like, everything changed for me when I started learning stuff like that. That I could have courage and I could take risks and I could put myself out there, and all of those things. Those are the lessons that I ended up taking away from the hike, carrying into choosing to quit drinking, and then moving into actually helping other people do that. Those are, I mean, everything you're talking about and reiterating there is that's the core of what I do now. Because I had never heard of none of that had ever crossed my mind as even something to think about or an option.
Have you found, since you've been honest about your story, that come across other women that, like, felt similarly?
Absolutely. Yeah. So a really interesting fact most people don't realize, or a couple little statistics for you. First, 1 in 10 people actually has an unhealthy relationship with alcohol, could be diagnosed with alcohol use disorder. That's a lot of people. If you think about, like I have 300 Facebook friends, like 30 of those people drink too much. And of those, I think it's 1 in 7 of those people might actually seek support. That doesn't even mean successfully stop using alcohol. That means they might look for help. So, yeah, the number of people out there that are drinking too much is mind blowing. And also, they all feel alone because most of them are keeping it together. Their lives are pretty much okay. Right. And yeah, the more I started talking about it, and that took a while to talk about it. That wasn't like, I didn't, come home and be like, all right, I'm going to get sober. Like, it took some time. It took a lot of work on my part to overcome the shame of that because it is so shameful when you realize that you have a drinking problem and that you can't figure it out on your own and that you're going to need some help and support to do this. And so it took a while for me to get to that point. When I did, and I started talking about it more, I realized how many people were just like me. And that was mind blowing because for so long I'd felt like I was the only one, like I was somehow my story was so different. I was keeping it all together on the outside and inside I was falling apart. And I thought I was like the only person that felt that way. I'm not even close. There are so many of us, men and women out there. The men have more of like a work drinking culture and the women have the mommy culture and whatever it is. Alcohol is shoved in your face all the time. And it is literally, it is an addictive substance that we all pretend you're supposed to be able to not get addicted to. And some people are lucky and they don't, but a lot of people aren't lucky and they do. Your body's just responding to an addictive substance the way it's supposed to. It gets addicted to it. And yeah, people, I feel like we don't talk about it enough because nobody wants to, because it's a little bit scary and shameful and embarrassing. I've said before, and there's going to be some people listening that will absolutely hear this and be like, oh, me too. Like, we tell ourselves, I just want to have one drink tonight. Realistically, I never wanted one drink. I wanted the bottle. That was all I wanted. And it's like that really great feeling you get after you take a drink or you have a glass of wine, you spend the rest of the night chasing that feeling and you don't ever get it again. And it turns into just this cycle of chasing that feeling that lasts maybe for 10 minutes after, you first open the bottle. And that is what addiction looks like. And it's just not the picture that we share. Alcohol is more addictive than heroin. And when somebody says, well, I don't do heroin, we're not like, God, why? What's wrong with you? Like, it's so much fun. Right? Right. But when you tell somebody, oh, I don't drink alcohol anymore, they're like, oh my God, like, did you have a problem? Like, why would you stop drinking? And like, because it's literally poison and it was destroying me physically and mentally. It was destroying me. But if we say that, they're like, oh my God, like something's wrong with you. Right? That's kind of what we get. That's the culture.
Yeah, no. And so like was that hard at first to like tell your friends, "Oh, I'm not drinking"?
For sure. So it is definitely, I remember the first time, I didn't go anywhere for 2 months after I decided to stop drinking because I wasn't sure I could trust myself to be around alcohol. And I didn't have like a real big party style life anyway. Like, I honestly drank mostly at home. But I remember going to like my first girls' night, with all my girlfriends, and somebody would always bring some fancy mixed drink, and I was like, no, I'm good. I'm just gonna have my soda over here, and you get the looks like, what's going on? But nobody actually said anything. Nobody asked why. And maybe they knew. Like, it's totally possible that they were like, oh yeah, like, we knew you drank too much. People say a lot of times like that everybody actually knew. And honestly, in my life, most of the people that I've talked to had no idea that I was drinking as much as I was. Like they sincerely didn't know. But no, it's hard to tell people at first. It gets easier. It starts becoming almost empowering. Like, I don't need alcohol to make me feel good anymore. I have a great life and I have a great time without it. And I'm confident in that. And that's empowering to be able to say to people. And you still get the odd person who's like, oh my God, what's wrong with you? But we also live in a world that's changing a lot. And we, as a culture, especially, I would say probably especially Western, American, Canadian culture, we're really starting to get behind unjudging and we're getting behind destigmatizing. And so it's easier now for me to say that I don't drink than it would have been 20 years ago, because people are like, oh, cool, good for you. And, we have this alcohol-free, I want to say almost fad, like there's so many non-alcoholic beers out there now, and it's turning into a thing. So it's easier now than it was, but it's still a little bit scary at first, for sure.
Oh, yeah. Like, and I think like what you said that like no one said anything, like, I think that like our real friends, they do want us to be happy, and whatever way, like if something's hurting us, like what you're talking about with like the heroin, right? It sifts out who's really like your true friend, you know?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, that's, if somebody's pushing and pushing and pushing to try to get you to drink again when you've told them you've decided to stop, that person is not looking out for your best interest. That person wants you to drink so they can feel better about their own drinking. Like that's almost always what that is. They're far more interested in they want you to drink so they can feel comfortable. They want you to drink so you'll act the fool to keep them entertained at night. Whatever it is, they're not looking out for your best interest. And that's a hard one to reckon with when for so many and this happens, I said it, like I wasn't a big drinker, but I work with a lot of people who their whole social life was at a bar or it was around a bunch of drinkers. Everything, all of their friends are big drinkers. And so when they choose to stop, then it's like, where do I even spend time with people now? Because all of these people surrounding them just want them to go back to drinking. And that is a battle. It gets really lonely for a while in those early days.
In wrapping up, leave your advice to someone, whether it is they're struggling with a substance or whatever it might be. What's your advice to them to help honor themselves, like what you were talking about?
Most of us go through our whole lives completely disconnected from who we really are. We start shaping ourselves from childhood to be what people need us to be in order for us to feel loved. And that right there is the foundation of a substance abuse problem. That's the foundation of eating problems or whatever, all of these different versions of escape that we use. It's that we're completely disconnected from who we are, what's important to us, what we value, and we eventually don't even have a self to love anymore because we don't even know who that is. And so the best advice that I can give is, get some support in the stopping for sure. And there's so many ways to do that. And I'm always happy to either help someone, and that is part of the work that I do, or I'm happy to help put them in contact with different groups and things like that. Get that help to stop, but it's not going to feel good. It's not going to feel fulfilling until you take the time to go back and figure out who you really are under all of society's expectations and all of the things that you learned in order to get people to like you. Once you start digging into that and really figuring out who you are and what that looks like, then you can start making the changes in your life that are going to make living alcohol free actually feel really good. And it's going to give you the direction you need to figure out what your life needs to look like so that you don't feel like you're just going through life without alcohol. You're finally like living a life that doesn't even need alcohol. And that's where the shift happens. It's not just about the quitting. Like that's important, but it's about everything that comes afterwards when you really start pulling away the layers and healing the hurt parts and finding the hidden parts and loving all of that. And then deciding what direction that needs to go.
Man, like I feel like I could listen to you talk forever. Thank you for all your wisdom. I feel like I learned a lot from you, and also to everyone who's been listening to this conversation. I hope that this gives you encouragement, whether you are struggling with alcohol or anything else in your life, to continue to put on your shoes, do your best, and believe in the impossible. And I'll catch you guys next Sunday.
All my